Hi there, my name is Sandra and you're watching The Schwowin's Nest. I decided to create a really pretty gallery wall using a whole bunch of different frames. I've got some old ones, some thrifted ones, and this one is from the Dollar Tree. Different shapes and sizes, but I want them to basically make a rectangle when I lay them all together. Using my homemade DIY chalk paint, I'm going to give each of the frames 2 coats and make sure I get almost full coverage. I created some designs and put them on just regular printer paper. And now I'm going to use the glass frames to cut out the paper and make sure I have the right size. I like to use a paper trimmer when I need nice straight lines. It's just a foolproof way of making sure that everything is perfectly cut. If you have white cardstock, you could probably just print your image right on there, but I didn't have any at the moment, so what I'm doing is taking a piece of colored cardstock and using the back as my front, and I'm just using a glue stick to put it on. I'll also be using a brayer. I bought a brayer not too long ago, and I really love using it for Mod Podge and for my glue stick. Makes a huge difference rather than just using your fingers to press down the paper. I've just really enjoyed using this. So if you don't have one, I would suggest to get one. And I believe I have this one linked down in my description box. When the frames are all dry, it's just time to put all of the images right inside. This frame is the one from the Dollar Tree. I'm not going to bother painting the back of it. If you're hanging it on a wall, you're not going to see it. But I'm just making sure that it's nice and centered, and then I'll just push down those little pins. Next, I'm going to take my sandpaper and just give the edges around the frame a good distressing. I want these to look old and weathered, and sandpaper just does the best job, in my opinion. I did the same process for each of the 4 frames with their different images, and this is how they turned out. Thank you so much to all of my current subscribers. I really appreciate your support. If you're new to my channel and you haven't yet hit that red button, I'd love it if you could subscribe too. I mentioned earlier that I wanted my gallery frames to form a rectangle, and they didn't quite make it. So I cut out this little piece of wood from one of the Dollar Tree signs, and I'm going to give it a couple of coats of white chalk paint, making sure that I get all the edges too. I got this package of handles at a thrift store and they're gold. It's not really my color. So I'm just going to give them a really light coat of white paint. And this is just the same chalk paint that I used for the sign. And once this is dry, I'm going to distress it and bring back some of that gold. I'm using a damp paper towel. I just spritz it with a little bit of water, and then I'm going to go around the edges and just pull off a little bit of the paint to reveal the gold underneath. This type of hardware is really popular in French country. You see a lot of buckles and belts and hinges and knobs. So I thought this piece would look really pretty put together on the board. I decided to use Gorilla Glue Clear Grip just to make sure that this handle would stay securely onto the board. Since it's going to be hung on a wall, it has the opportunity to fall down if it's not glued on properly. And even just like this, plain right on top of that whiteboard, I just think it looks really pretty. But I definitely can't leave it plain because it just wouldn't suit. It needs a little bit of something. I've got these really pretty magnolia flowers that have a little bit of pink on the inside. I'm going to add 2, one at the top, one underneath. I'm going to add some greenery and some other little bits of greenery. And then I'm going to also frame this out because I forgot to add the framing part of it before I started gluing everything together. So I'll have to do that afterwards, but I wanted it to also look a little bit like a frame. To create a simple frame look on top of this little board, I'm using some coffee stir sticks and I'm just measuring out what I need, and then I'll just use these little snips to trim them down. I'll use hot glue to apply them to the wood piece, and then I'm just going to give them a couple of coats of white chalk paint. Once the chalk paint was dry, I distressed it just a little bit with some gray paint just to bring out the same sort of coloring as the rest of the frames. Say hello to my newest craft kit. This is a sweet little dress form on a pedestal, and it comes with the two oval pieces which become the stand. I love this little thing. I think it turned out so sweet. If you haven't already checked out my Etsy shop, right now until February 14th, I'm offering free shipping when you buy 3 of my craft kits. So make sure you check the link down in my description box and go see if there's anything that you would like to use to craft in your home. I'm going to give this dress form piece 2 coats of chalk paint front, back, and sides. I'm going to paint the 2 slices with the chalk paint as well, but I want to put them together first. And I'm also going to leave the top part of it, just the raw wood for now, until I have a chance to glue down the dress form. I printed off this sweet little French vintage paper sheet, and this one came straight from Pixabay. I didn't do anything with this one. I thought this one would be perfect for French country. It's got a bird cage, it has a card with the Eiffel Tower, and it also has some script on it. I already traced out the dress form right on top of where I wanted it to be, and now I'm just cutting that out as well. You can use Mod Podge to glue this on, or you can just use a glue stick like I am. If I was using cardstock, I'd probably use Mod Podge just because it's a little bit thicker and it holds better. But again, that brayer that I use is just amazing, and it really pushes that paper into the glue and makes everything seal up really well. I'm going to use just a little emery board to sand down the edges, and if there's any paper that's hanging over, that will just get cleaned up. Then I'm also going to rough it up a little bit more and bring out some of that charred wood, which is a little bit of a darker color, and then that will give it even more of a distressed look. I decided to make a little messy bow to put on top of the dress form. Actually, I think I put it right underneath the dress itself. I'm using some twine, some cotton rope that's white, and a little bit of this green ribbon that I trimmed down and made it really nice and narrow. What I've got here is a piece of twine that I laid down first, and that's going to make it really easy for me to just pick up the twine and tie everything together. The white cotton rope is really nice and frayed, so I'm just working it here and making it fray out even more. I played around with the placement of the bow. I wasn't quite sure, but I didn't want to cover up that paper. I thought it was so pretty. So I ended up putting the bow right underneath the dress form, right on top of the pedestal portion. I never like a bow to have nothing in the center of it, so I'm adding just these tiny 2 little leaves and a pretty little pink wax flower that I picked up at the Dollar Tree in a bunch, and that's just going to be the perfect addition to this bow to make it look finished. Now it's time to attach the dress form to the stand, and I'm using a generous amount of hot glue, and I'll center it as best I can and then make sure that it's nice and set before I let go. I added some Spanish moss all the way around the bottom of the pedestal part, just because then I didn't have to worry about painting that. I was going to be covering it up anyway. Then I added some greenery and some more of those little wax flowers, and I think this turned out absolutely beautiful. I think it's so pretty. I think I'm going to offer 2 options for this dress form. One with all the accessories you see here, although I will have a limited supply, and then one that is just the 3 pieces of wood. Here's a few ways you can support me on my channel. First, you can like and subscribe. Liking gets me noticed more on YouTube, and subscribing helps my channel grow. If you watch the ads, that's one of the ways I get paid. Lastly, you can buy me a coffee. It's spelled Kofi, and there's a link down in my description box. For this project, I'm starting out with this really thick piece of wood that I get from someone in town on Facebook Marketplace. And then I had an extra wood round that I cut out with my laser machine. And I'm going to glue these two together to make somewhat of a tray. I took a bunch of these wood beads and put them on a wire that would make it easy for me to bend it into a circle and help me to glue it right onto the little lip that's sticking out underneath. I'm just going to use hot glue to put these on. Because it's all wood that's being glued together, the hot glue is perfect. I am going to use a generous amount of it and make sure that I hold the beads in place until they're completely set up. I found this was much easier having the beads on a wire than doing them individually, and I was able to kind of wiggle them around and make sure that they all fit so I didn't have any large gaps towards the end. I've got the tray now sitting on a turntable or a lazy Susan, whatever you want to call it, and I'm just going to do some dry brushing with my white chalk paint. I don't want all of the wood to be covered up. I want it to look kind of whitewashed, and if a little bit of that raw wood peeks through, I'm good with that. That's the look I'm going for. Once I get to the top, I am going to go a little heavier with the paint, but still not a full coat. I still want some of that wood to be showing through. This is all that I'm going to do to this tray. The rest of it is all about staging it and making it work. I found a glass cloche that didn't have a bottom to it at the thrift store, and that's what I'm going to be using to cover this with. I also grabbed a little blue teacup that I think is perfect for French country. I added some Spanish moss into it with a few eggs and added some little blossoms around the outside. And I think this is a perfect French country look. I'm always saving jars from the recycling bin because I think they make really inexpensive but beautiful home decor if you've got something fun to do with them. I'm starting off by painting this one black, and I'm going to paint another one black as well. And what I want to do is try a crackle technique. Now, sometimes when I've been blow drying my chalk paint on whatever project that I'm doing, whether it's wood or glass or metal, if I get too close to the chalk paint with my blow dryer with the heat, it starts to crackle on its own. So I wanted to actually put this to the test. Once the black paint was completely dry, I'm putting a fairly thick coat of my chalk paint on top. And I'm going to make sure that I don't brush over it too much because I want that thickness to stay there. That's going to help with the crackle. So here I go with my blow dryer, and I've got it on high heat and high power, and I'm holding it really close to the glass. And as soon as it starts to dry, the crackle starts to come through. Now, remember, I don't have anything in between the black paint and the white paint. I just wanted to try this technique and just give these jars a subtle crackled effect. Here's how the crackling turned out, and I think it's pretty neat. Another technique that I've been wanting to try is stamping on tissue paper. I always make sure that I place the shiny side of the tissue paper down. If you haven't noticed that yet, there is a shinier side and a matte side, and you always want to be printing or stamping on the matte side. I'm just using some Scotch tape to just tape it down onto some paper because the ink will bleed through the tissue paper. Make sure that the first time you use any of these silicone stamps, you use a really fine sandpaper just to scuff them up a little bit. And once you're done with them, make sure you clean them right away. I've just inked up the stamp and now I'm very carefully going to press it into place and try not to move it around. I am really great at wiggling the stamp around too much and sometimes using too much pressure that it moves a little bit. So you want to be very careful and gentle with these. Now, it didn't come out very dark, but that's okay because I want it to look more vintage. I'm going to do the same thing with my second stamp. This second stamp that I used was very plain. It just had text. It is still one of the IOD stamps. So I went into my stash of stamps and found something that I thought might be good to use on the top and the bottom. So I'm just going to add those and then I'll be ready for the next step. I'm going to use Rust-Oleum Matte Clear Finish and give each of these tissue paper stamped images a good spray, and then I'm going to let them dry for at least a half an hour or longer if I can. And the reason I'm doing that is I want that ink to be into the tissue paper and I don't want it to smear. I have tried this technique before with not good results. The ink smeared when I used the Mod Podge. This time it worked really well. I use Mod Podge to attach the tissue paper to my project and then very carefully with my brush having Mod Podge on it so it's not dry. I just start from the inside and work my way out to smooth everything down. I love how the crackle and the labels turned out on these jars, but I was really stumped as to how to decorate the top parts of the jars. I did add some rope and some ribbons and bows, but I'm not really happy with how that part turned out. Let me know in the comments what you would have done differently for these projects. Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. I really appreciate each and every one of you. If you liked what you saw in this video, I'd love it if you could hit that thumbs up button. That gets me noticed more on YouTube and helps my channel grow. Don't forget to hit the red subscribe button and that notification bell. You don't want to miss out on anything else I have to share. Bye for now.